First contact. The Veil Empire had ruled the stars for 12,000 years. Their domain stretched across 17 galactic arms, encompassing over 30,000 inhabited worlds. Their technology was the stuff of legend. Starships that could cross the galaxy in days, weapons that could shatter planets, and immortality for their ruling class. The Veil had conquered every species they encountered, subjugating them with brutal efficiency until resistance was nothing but a distant memory. In the central command hub of the Veil's capital world, Zenith Prime, High Commander Drax stood before the strategic display. His seven-fingered hand traced the borders of their territory, pausing at a small blinking anomaly on the outer rim. "What is this disturbance?" Drax asked, his voice carrying the artificial resonance of the elite. A junior officer stepped forward, her scaled skin gleaming in the blue light. "Unknown signal, High Commander. It appeared 3 cycles ago on the edge of the Norillion sector. Classification. That's the peculiar thing, sir. It doesn't match any known pattern. It's structured but uses frequencies we've never encountered." Drax dismissed the concern with a flick of his wrist. "A cosmic aberration, nothing more. The Norillion sector is empty space, perhaps debris from the Kaldor Nebula." The junior officer hesitated. "Sir, the signal is moving, and it's growing stronger." This caught Drax's attention. Moving signals meant ships, and ships meant life forms. The Veil had cataloged every sentient species in their region of space. An unknown signal could mean only one thing: a previously undiscovered civilization. "Monitor it," he ordered. "If it crosses into our territory, dispatch a scout vessel." 3 days later, Commander Nara Vel received the assignment to investigate the anomaly. Unlike Drax, Nara belonged to the analytical caste of the Veil, bred for critical thinking rather than combat. Her ship, the Vigilant Observer, was designed for reconnaissance, not confrontation. As her vessel approached the coordinates, Nara reviewed the data. The signal had changed, becoming more complex, more deliberate. This was no cosmic accident. This was communication. "Send a standard greeting across all frequencies," she instructed her crew. "Let's see if they respond." The message was simple, a mathematical sequence establishing basic intelligence, followed by identification markers for the Veil Empire. It was the same protocol they had used for centuries when encountering primitive species. The response came almost instantly, not just a mimicry of their sequence, but an expansion of it, solving complex equations the Veil used as intelligence markers. Then something unprecedented happened. The unknown signal sent back a complete map of the Veil Empire's territory. "They know us," Nara whispered, a chill running through her spine. "How is that possible?" Her tactical officer's voice trembled. "Commander, we're detecting objects approaching at high velocity." The view screen showed nothing but empty space, but the sensors told a different story. Hundreds of objects, moving faster than any Veil ship, were headed directly toward them. "Full defensive protocols," Nara ordered. "Prepare for—" "Wait," her science officer interrupted. "They're not weapons. They're probes, small unmanned devices." Before Nara could respond, the probes surrounded the Vigilant Observer, keeping a respectful distance. They were elegant machines, their design unlike anything in the Veil database. They emitted no hostile signatures, just continued broadcasting their complex signal. "They're scanning us," the science officer reported. "Every detail of our ship, our technology, even our biological signatures." Nara made a decision. "Transmit everything we know about these probes to Zenith Prime. I want a direct channel to High Commander Drax." When Drax's image appeared on the communication screen, his expression was one of bored impatience. "Commander Vel, you've interrupted a strategic planning session for some probes." "Sir, these aren't just probes. They're advanced technology, possibly beyond our own. And they've mapped our entire empire." Drax's expression didn't change. "Impossible. No species possesses technology beyond the Veil. What race claims responsibility for these devices?" "They call themselves humans, sir. from a system called Sol. Humans. Drax's dismissal was evident. Never heard of them. They must be a minor species from beyond the rim. Destroy one of their probes as a warning and return to your patrol route. Nera hesitated. Sir, I strongly advise against hostile action until we understand their capabilities. Your advice is noted, Commander. Your orders are clear. The communication ended, and Nera faced her crew. Target the smallest probe with a minimal energy pulse. I want to disable, not destroy. The tactical officer complied, firing a precision beam at one of the probes. The beam never reached its target. It simply disappeared midway, absorbed by some invisible field. The tactical officer struggled for words. That's not possible. Suddenly, all the probes retreated simultaneously, moving with uncanny coordination. They formed a perfect sphere around the vigilant observer, then projected a holographic image in the space between them. It showed a fleet of ships, thousands of them, arranged in a formation that stretched beyond what the hologram could display. The ships were sleek, utilitarian, and unmistakably built for war. At the center was a massive vessel that dwarfed even the Veil's largest dreadnoughts. A message followed, transmitted in perfect Veil language. We are humanity. We have observed your empire for decades. We know of your conquests, your subjugations, your atrocities. We have decided they must end. You will receive our ambassadors in 7 days. Prepare for fundamental change. The hologram vanished, and with it, the probes disappeared, accelerating beyond the vigilant observer's ability to track them. Nera immediately transmitted everything to Zenith Prime, including her strong recommendation for diplomatic preparation rather than military response. This time, Drax didn't dismiss her so easily. Within hours, the Veil's intelligence network was in chaos. Reports flooded in from across the Empire. Human probes had been spotted near every major Veil installation, every fleet, every colony world. They had been watching, cataloging, analyzing. For how long, no one knew. In an emergency session of the Imperial Council, Drax found himself defending his initial dismissal of the threat. These humans, whoever they are, have no understanding of our power, he insisted. They speak of ending our atrocities, the arrogance. We have brought order to a chaotic galaxy, unified disparate species under our benevolent rule. Elder Counselor Varix, whose memory stretched back millennia, raised a withered hand. I recall similar words spoken by the Arcturus hegemony before we obliterated their civilization. Arrogance is believing oneself invincible, High Commander. The debate raged for hours. Some called for immediate military mobilization, others for diplomatic preparation. In the end, the Veil's pride won out. They would receive these human ambassadors, but from a position of overwhelming strength. Every available warship was recalled to Zenith Prime, a show of force meant to impress upon these upstarts the futility of challenging the Veil. Commander Nera Vel was summoned to the capital, her first-hand experience with the human probes deemed valuable. As her ship approached Zenith Prime, she marveled at the assembled Veil fleet, nearly 10,000 warships, arranged in the ancient spherical formation that had broken countless enemy fleets. Yet something troubled her. The humans had observed the Veil for decades. They knew this would be the response. Why announce themselves at all? Why not strike from the shadows? Her answer came 3 days before the scheduled arrival of the human ambassadors. The long-range sensors of Zenith Prime detected a massive energy surge from the direction of the Norillian sector. The void of space seemed to ripple, then tear open in a controlled dimensional rift. Through this impossible opening came the human fleet. Not the thousands of ships from the holographic warning. Millions. An armada so vast it defied comprehension, emerging from what the Veil scientists could only describe as artificial wormholes. The humans had not traveled across the galaxy. They had bent space itself to bring their entire civilization to the Veil's doorstep. As the first images reached the Imperial Council, silence fell over the chamber. The human ships dwarfed the Veil fleet, their designs varied yet harmonious, suggesting a federation of different human cultures rather than a monolithic empire. High Commander, one of the sensor technicians reported, his voice barely audible, "We're detecting energy readings from the human fleet that exceed our measuring capabilities." For the first time in his long life, Drax felt fear. Not concern, not anxiety, but primal fear. He looked at the assembled counselors, seeing the same emotion reflected in their eyes. "Open a channel," he ordered. Tell them we are prepared to receive their ambassadors." As the message was transmitted, Naravel stood at the observation deck, watching the human fleet take position around Zenith Prime. Their ships moved with impossible precision, forming complex geometric patterns that seemed both artistic and strategically sound. They could have attacked without warning, she whispered to herself. They wanted us to see them coming. They wanted us to understand. And in that moment, as the mighty Veil Empire faced an unexpected reckoning, Nara realized the truth. The humans had not come to conquer. They had come to change the very order of the galaxy. The enemy had finally understood. Humanity was coming, and nothing would ever be the same again. The human strategy. The ambassador's vessel was small by comparison to the behemoths in the human fleet. It approached Zenith Prime alone, unarmed and unescorted. A gesture the Veil interpreted as either supreme confidence or utter foolishness. The ship's design was elegant but utilitarian, its hull marked with symbols that the Veil's linguists struggled to decipher. In the grand reception hall of the Imperial Palace, High Commander Drax stood flanked by the 12 members of the Imperial Council. They had decided to project strength through ceremony, donning their most elaborate regalia and surrounding themselves with the elite of the Veil Guard. The message was clear. We are ancient. We are powerful. We are unimpressed. Remember, Drax instructed the assembled dignitaries, show no weakness. These humans must understand their place in the galactic order. Commander Naravel, still troubled by her encounter with the human probes, stood to the side, officially present as an advisor but effectively sidelined by Drax. She had cautioned for a more moderate approach, suggesting that perhaps traditional Veil diplomacy, based on intimidation and implied threats, might not be effective with a species capable of creating artificial wormholes. Her concerns had been dismissed. The great doors of the reception hall parted, and the human delegation entered. There were 5 of them, diverse in appearance, suggesting different ethnic origins. They wore simple, dark uniforms without ornamentation or rank insignia. Leading them was a woman of average height, her dark skin contrasting with silver-white hair that appeared natural rather than a sign of age. "I am Admiral Chen of Earth," she announced in flawless Veil language. "I speak for the United Systems of Humanity." Drax inclined his head slightly, the barest minimum of diplomatic courtesy. "I am High Commander Drax, voice of the Eternal Emperor, ruler of the Veil Dominion that has brought peace to this galaxy for 12,000 years. He deliberately used the Veil's ancient titles, emphasizing their longevity. Admiral Chen smiled slightly. 12,000 years is indeed impressive. Our unified government is barely 2 centuries old. Of course, our species has existed for several 100,000 years, so perhaps we're just late bloomers. The casual reference to humanity's age, far greater than the Veil species itself, was not lost on Drax. It was a subtle reminder that the humans, while new to interstellar politics, were not a young species. "You've gone to considerable trouble to arrange this meeting," Drax said, avoiding the implicit challenge. "State your purpose." Chen nodded, her expression growing serious. "The Veil Empire has subjugated 17 sentient species, exterminated 6 others that refused subjugation, and rules through systematic oppression. This ends now." The bluntness of her statement caused a ripple of shock through the assembled Veil dignitaries. No one spoke to the Veil this way, certainly not in their own throne room. "You dare," began one of the counselors before Drax silenced him with a gesture. "And how do you propose to end 12 millennia of established order?" Drax asked, his tone dangerously soft. Chen's response was equally measured. We offer a choice. The Veil can transition to a cooperative government that respects the autonomy of its member worlds, or humanity will dismantle your empire and establish that new order ourselves. With your fleet? Drax allowed himself a dismissive gesture. Impressive though it may be, we have faced and defeated many armadas. Not like ours, Chen replied. But our fleet is merely one aspect of our approach. Allow me to demonstrate something. Before Drax could respond, Chen raised her hand slightly. Instantly, the lights throughout the Imperial Palace flickered, then stabilized. On every display screen and holographic projector, the same image appeared. Detailed schematics of the Veil's most secret weapon systems, defensive grids, and even the personal security protocols of the Imperial Council members. While we've been talking, Chen explained, our systems have mapped your entire computational network. We know every secret, every weakness, every contingency plan you've ever developed. The Imperial Council erupted in outrage, but Chen continued as if they hadn't spoken. This isn't a negotiation in the way you understand the term. This is a notification. In 7 standard days, the Veil Empire as you know it will cease to exist. How that happens is up to you. Drax fought to maintain his composure. You threaten us with war. The Veil has never lost a conflict. We don't threaten war, Chen corrected him. We guarantee change. Whether that change comes through cooperation or conflict is your choice. As the human delegation departed, leaving the Imperial Council in stunned silence, Nera Vel watched Admiral Chen closely. There was something in the human's demeanor that troubled her, not arrogance, but absolute certainty. As if the outcome was already determined. In the emergency session that followed, the Veil's military leadership was divided. Some advocated immediate attack, arguing that allowing the humans time to prepare would only strengthen their position. Others urged caution, pointing out the technological gap evidenced by the humans' ability to penetrate the Empire's most secure networks. They're bluffing, Drax insisted. No species could dismantle our empire in 7 days. It's a psychological tactic. What if it isn't? Nora asked. All eyes turned to her. What if they've calculated exactly how long it would take? We know almost nothing about their capabilities. Then enlighten us, Commander, Drax said, his tone mocking. Since you seem to have developed such insight into these humans. Nera stood firm. Their first communication with us was a map of our entire empire. Their probes neutralized our weapons without effort. They travel through artificial wormholes, and they've just demonstrated complete control over our information systems. Every interaction suggests technology far beyond our own. All the more reason to strike now, argued War Counselor Krev, before they can bring their full capabilities to bear. The debate might have continued indefinitely, but it was interrupted by an urgent communication from the Veil's outermost colonial sector. The governor's image flickered on the main display, his expression one of barely controlled panic. The subject species are revolting, he reported. Simultaneously, across all worlds in the sector, they're using weapons we've never seen, coordinating in ways that should be impossible given our communication restrictions. Similar reports began flooding in from across the Empire. On thousands of worlds, the subjugated species had risen up at precisely the same moment, armed with technology that bypassed Veil defenses. It wasn't chaotic rebellion, it was coordinated revolution. The humans, Nero realized. They've been in contact with the subject species, preparing them. The implications were staggering. It meant the humans had been infiltrating the Empire for years, possibly decades, building networks and distributing technology without detection. Drax's face had drained of color. Full military mobilization, he ordered. Every fleet, every garrison. Crush these rebellions and prepare for war with the humans. But the mobilization order never reached its destinations. The Veil's communication network collapsed entirely, replaced by a single broadcast that reached every Veil ship, station, and colony simultaneously. It showed Admiral Chen, her expression solemn. "Attention all citizens of the Vale Empire, the promised change has begun. Vale military and government officials, your weapons systems have been temporarily disabled. This is not an invasion. It is a transition. Cooperate, and no harm will come to you. Resist, and you will be removed from power." The message continued, providing specific instructions for different regions of the empire. Most shocking was the evidence that accompanied it. Detailed records of the Vale's crimes against the subject species, their internal communications discussing genocides and atrocities as matters of policy. In the command center, Drax watched as his empire began to unravel. The carefully constructed hierarchy of fear and control that had maintained Vale dominance for millennia was collapsing in a matter of hours. "Launch the dreadnoughts," he ordered, desperation creeping into his voice. "Target the human flagship. If we kill their leadership." "The dreadnoughts aren't responding," the weapons officer reported. "None of our capital ships are accepting commands." Nara watched the strategic display as Vale military assets across the galaxy went dark, their control systems overridden. Not destroyed, simply neutralized. The human fleet remained in position, barely moving, as if their physical presence was an afterthought to their true strategy. "They never intended to fight us conventionally," she realized aloud. This was never about fleet against fleet. They weaponized information itself. As if in response to her insight, a private communication channel opened on her personal device. The message was brief. "Commander Vale, your analysis is correct. We would appreciate your assistance in minimizing casualties during the transition. Admiral Chen awaits your response." Nara looked around at the chaos of the command center, at Drax shouting increasingly desperate orders that no one could execute, at the Imperial Council members frantically trying to secure escape vessels. The Vale had ruled through fear and technology for 12,000 years. Now they faced a species that had overcome both, a species that had revealed the Empire's greatest vulnerability, its dependence on complex systems that, once compromised, rendered its vast military might useless. The humans hadn't come to conquer. They had come to liberate. And in doing so, they had demonstrated a form of warfare the Vale had never imagined possible. As Nara contemplated the human request, watching her civilization's power structures collapse around her, she understood the truth that High Commander Drax and the Imperial Council could not accept. The war was already over. It had ended the moment the humans arrived. The only question remaining was whether the Vale would accept their defeat with dignity, or force the humans to demonstrate just how completely outmatched they truly were. The Reckoning. Zenith Prime, once the jewel of the Vale Empire, had become a city under invisible siege. No shots had been fired, no buildings destroyed. Yet the mighty administrative center of a 12,000-year imperial legacy had effectively ceased to function. Communication systems remained down. Transportation grids operated only for civilian emergency services, and the grand military apparatus that had enforced Vale dominance across 17 galactic arms stood silent and unresponsive. 6 days had passed since Admiral Chen's ultimatum. 6 days of mounting chaos as the Empire collapsed not from external attack, but from internal dissolution. In the Imperial Palace, High Commander Drax had gathered what remained of his loyal forces, barely 300 elite guards armed with ancient projectile weapons that didn't depend on the compromised Vale technology. They had barricaded the central command center, converting it into a last bastion of resistance. The humans have overreached. Drax insisted to his desperate officers. No victory is this complete, this bloodless. They must have vulnerabilities we haven't identified. Commander Nara Vale, who had declined the human invitation to assist with the transition, stood at the periphery of the group, not out of loyalty to Drax, but from a scientist's curiosity. She wanted to understand how this unprecedented collapse had been engineered, to witness firsthand the final moments of the civilization she had served all her life. "Sir," she said carefully, "perhaps it's time to consider Admiral Chen's offer. The Empire is lost, But our species could survive with dignity if we cooperate. Drax turned on her, his face contorted with rage. Cooperate. Become subjects ourselves after millennia of rule. I would rather die with honor than live as a human pet. I don't believe that's what they're offering, Nera countered. From everything we've seen, they're dismantling our power structures, not our society. Before Drax could respond, the palace lights flickered, then changed to an unfamiliar configuration. The sealed doors of the command center opened silently, despite the physical barricades. Through them walked Admiral Chen, alone and unarmed. The veiled guards raised their weapons, but Drax signaled them to hold. "How did you penetrate our defenses?" he demanded. Chen glanced around the room, her expression one of professional assessment rather than triumph. "Your defenses ceased to be meaningful the moment we decided they should be. High Commander, I've come to offer you one final opportunity to facilitate a peaceful transition. By surrendering my empire." "Never. The empire is already gone," Chen replied, her tone matter-of-fact. "What you're clinging to is an illusion of power that hasn't truly existed since we arrived." She gestured, and the central holographic display activated, showing real-time images from across the former Veil territories. On world after world, Veil administrators were being peacefully replaced by councils composed of both previously subjugated species and moderate Veil citizens. There was no bloodshed, no revenge killings, just the methodical dismantling of an oppressive system. "This isn't conquest," Chen explained. "It's correction. Humanity doesn't want your territory or your resources. We want stable, peaceful neighbors who don't build empires through genocide and subjugation." Drax laughed bitterly. "You expect me to believe your species crossed intergalactic distances out of altruism? No one acts without self-interest. Our self-interest is security," Chen acknowledged. 400 years ago, humanity nearly destroyed itself in wars driven by the same impulses that built your empire: domination, exploitation, fear of the other. We survived by learning that true security doesn't come from subjugating potential threats, but from building systems where threats don't emerge in the first place. She stepped closer to Drax, ignoring the weapons trained on her. "We've studied your history, your culture, your biology. The Veil aren't inherently cruel. Your empire wasn't inevitable. It was a choice, repeated by generations of leaders like you. We're offering your people the chance to make a different choice." Nera watched Drax closely, seeing the conflict behind his eyes. His entire identity was bound to the empire, to the unquestioned superiority of the Veil. Accepting Chen's offer meant accepting that the foundation of his existence was fundamentally flawed. "And if I refuse?" Drax asked, his voice barely audible. "Then we continue without you," Chen said simply. "The transition is happening regardless of your participation. The only variable is how many of your people have to be removed from positions of power rather than integrated into the new systems." She turned to address the room at large. "To all Veil citizens, we bear you no ill will. Your civilization has made remarkable achievements in science, art, philosophy. Those achievements will be preserved and honored. What will not continue is the subjugation of other sentient beings." The silence that followed was broken by Nera stepping forward. "Admiral, you mentioned that humans nearly destroyed themselves. How did you overcome that destructive impulse? How can you be certain the Veil can do the same?" Chen's expression softened slightly. "We didn't overcome it, Commander Veil. We recognized it as a permanent part of our nature. The capacity for cruelty alongside the capacity for compassion. What changed was our understanding that we had to build systems that channeled our better impulses and constrained our worst ones." She gestured again, and the holographic display shifted to show Earth, the blue-green world orbiting an unremarkable yellow star. "Our homeworld bears the scars of our mistakes. Regions still uninhabitable from nuclear conflict, species lost to extinction through our carelessness, cultures erased by conquest. We carry those failures with us as reminders." The display zoomed out, showing the vast human territory, not an empire, but a federation of thousands of worlds, some populated by species clearly not human. When we discovered faster-than-light travel and began encountering other intelligent life, we faced a choice, Chen continued. Would we repeat our historical patterns of conquest and exploitation, or would we apply the hard lessons we'd learned? We chose the latter. Drax stared at the display, his expression unreadable. And now you impose those choices on us. We present alternative possibilities, Chen corrected. The imposition was your empire's subjugation of unwilling species. We're ending that imposition. A tense silence filled the room as Drax considered his options. Nara could see the calculations behind his eyes. Not military ones, for those avenues were closed, but personal ones. How would history remember him? As the last defender of a fallen empire, or as the leader who guided his people through a difficult transition? Finally, Drax spoke, his voice heavy with resignation. What guarantees do we have that the Veil will not simply become subjects ourselves? That this isn't merely replacing one dominion with another? Chen nodded, acknowledging the legitimacy of the question. No guarantees, only evidence. Observe how we've handled the transition thus far. No Veil citizens have been harmed unless they initiated violence. Your cultural institutions remain intact. Your people retain autonomy in all matters except those that would reinstate systems of oppression. She produced a small device. Placing it on the command table, it projected a document, a proposed treaty outlining the terms of transition. This isn't a demand for surrender. It's an invitation to partnership in building something better than empire. As Drax read through the document, his shoulders gradually lowered, the tension visibly leaving his body. The terms were far more generous than any the Veil would have offered a defeated enemy. They preserved Veil sovereignty over their homeworlds while dismantling the imperial structure that had enabled their domination of others. Why? He asked finally, looking up at Chen. Why offer us this when you could simply impose your will completely? Because imposition breeds resistance, Chen replied. Because ruling through force guarantees eventual rebellion. Because the cycle of dominance and resistance is what we're trying to break, not perpetuate. She gestured toward Nara. Your own people recognize this. Commander Vel and others like her have already been working with us, not out of betrayal, but out of recognition that change was necessary. Drax turned to Nara, surprise evident in his expression. You've been collaborating with them. I've been learning from them, Nara corrected. Studying how they achieved what our intelligence services thought impossible. They infiltrated our empire not with spies or saboteurs, but with ideas. They armed the subjugated species not with weapons, but with hope. She stepped forward to stand beside Chen. They could have destroyed us, High Commander. Instead, they're offering us a future. The tension in the room had shifted. The Veil guards looked to Drax, awaiting his decision, but there was uncertainty in their posture now. The absolute conviction in their superiority, in the righteousness of their empire, had been shaken. Drax looked around at his officers, at the loyal guards who had followed him into this last stand. Then he looked beyond them, to the holographic images of worlds where peaceful transition was already underway, where Veil citizens and formerly subjugated species were beginning the difficult work of building new relationships based on mutual respect rather than dominance. With a deliberation that bespoke his awareness of the historical significance of the moment, Drax placed his hand on the treaty document. For 12,000 years, the Veil defined strength as the ability to conquer. Perhaps it is time we learned a new definition. He looked directly at Chen. I accept your terms, Admiral, not in surrender but in recognition that the Veil must evolve or perish. The Empire ends today. As the treaty was formalized, and the news spread throughout Zenith Prime, Nara found herself standing on a balcony overlooking the capital city. Admiral Chen joined her, both of them watching as the ancient imperial banners were lowered from government buildings, replaced not with human symbols, but with new emblems representing cooperation between the Veil and the species they had once ruled. You knew he would accept, Nara said, not a question, but a realization. Chen nodded. We've studied thousands of authoritarian systems across multiple species. They follow predictable patterns of rise and fall. The key was creating circumstances where accepting change became more viable than resisting it. And if he had chosen resistance, then we would have proceeded without him, with greater difficulty but the same eventual outcome. Chen turned to face her directly. Humanity didn't cross the gulf between stars to replace one empire with another, Commander Vel. We came because we recognized in the Veil the same patterns that nearly destroyed us. She gestured toward the city below, where the first signs of a new order were becoming visible. This isn't an ending. It's a continuation of a process that began on Earth centuries ago. The long, difficult work of building societies that channel our collective strengths while protecting against our individual weaknesses. Nera considered this, finding an unexpected resonance with her own scientific training. The pursuit of knowledge not for power, but for improvement. What happens now? Now comes the harder part, Chen admitted. Dismantling an empire is relatively straightforward compared to building something better in its place. That's where we'll need leaders like you. Veil citizens who can envision a future beyond dominance. As night fell on Zenith Prime, marking the last day of the 12,000-year Veil Empire, the stars seemed brighter somehow. Among them, the human fleet remained in orbit, not as conquerors but as witnesses to a transformation they had initiated but could not complete. The enemy had finally understood that humanity was coming, not with the fire and fury of traditional conquest, but with the steady, inexorable force of a better idea. An idea powerful enough to topple empires without firing a shot, to transform civilizations without destroying them. An idea that perhaps in time would transform the galaxy itself.